Google's Nexus 5, designed by LG and designed by Google as well, they definitely had a hand in it, is here in the PhoneDog offices. I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com, and Google's latest flagship device packs a quad-core processor, 4G LTE, 2 gigabytes of RAM, and a really impressive $350 starting price point. Is it worth buying, particularly with the Note 3, the One, the One Max, the G2, the Galaxy S4, all of these other high-end Android devices sitting in carrier stores just waiting to be bought? I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com, and that is what we're going to find out in the full video review of the LG Nexus 5. It's finally in the PhoneDog offices, or at least PhoneDog West. The Google Nexus 5, designed by Google, manufactured by LG, a direct hand in the process by Google, and this is the latest iteration and very popular, at least among devs and some consumers, but mostly tech enthusiasts, Nexus line of devices. The Nexus 5 has a 2.26 gigahertz quad-core Snapdragon 800 CPU. It's packing a 4.95-inch HD display. It's a 1080p HD display, an 8-megapixel camera with 1080p HD video recording and optical image stabilization. It's got 2 gigabytes of RAM. This is the 16 gigabyte model, but there is a 32 gigabyte version as well if you so desire. 2,300 milliamp hour battery and 4G LTE connectivity. It's unlocked and can be supported on Sprint, AT&T, or T-Mobile. But the best part possibly of all, it's got great specifications. It's got Android 4.4 KitKat. It's the only device right now to have Android 4.4 KitKat, and the best is the price point for a lot of people. This thing comes in unlocked at 16 gigabytes for $349. The 32 gigabyte version is going to set you back $399. So for an unlocked device, keeping this in mind versus, let's say, the Note 3 or the G2, all these devices that are $500 to $700, even $800 full retail, depending on whether you're getting it at a store like Best Buy or through the carrier stores, there's a great value add to be had here just in price alone, taking everything else out of the picture. A high-end device for $350 unlocked, going to be a great win for a lot of different people. Before we get too far into the Nexus 5 full video review, I want to thank our partners at Best Buy Mobile. They give us devices like the Nexus 5, like the Note 3, the Galaxy S4, the One, all those different devices for use in our giveaway game on the site at PhoneDog.com. When you walk into Best Buy Mobile to get this, when it comes out on the carriers or any other device, you'll walk out working. They'll make sure your Twitter account, your maps set up, your camera settings, all your applications you want are downloaded, so you'll walk out the door working, thanks to the boys in blue at Best Buy Mobile. So let's talk a little bit about design. Let's talk about the overall look and feel and the specs. And then in part two, we'll focus in a little bit more on the software. We'll do speed tests, and we'll talk more about KitKat and things like that. First of all, Nexus 5 here, like I said, just ran down the specs. On the left side, you've got, as you would expect, your volume rocker. On the right side, you've got your power button and micro SIM card slot. Up here, you've got your 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Down at the bottom, speakers and micro USB charging port. And then on the back, you've got your camera with a flash sitting just below it. You've got kind of a matte soft touch back here with the Nexus logo. Back in the back, nice big font and LG's logo down here as well. But overall, really easy to hold in the hand. And from a distance, it sort of, I should say, looks like the LG G2. You've got on-screen buttons here, a notification light down at the bottom. You've got a speaker earpiece here. Now, interestingly enough, take a closer look at the speaker earpiece. I'm going to get it in the light just so you can kind of take a look at it. The earpiece is circular, unlike the kind of square and long and skinny, if you will, or long and short earpieces you would expect from other devices. The circular approach is definitely different on the Nexus 5, but fits in the hand nice and easy. Just under a 5-inch display. They're actually marketing it as a 5-inch display, so it is a nice big display for content creation, but it's still pocketable and still pretty thin and pretty light here at, I believe, 8.59 millimeters thin. I'm quoting that off memory, but I believe that's what it comes in at. So really thin, really light. The soft touch back here, at least on the black version, is quite nice. There are actually some design differences between the black version, which obviously is right here, and the white version, which we don't have. The glossy sides in the white version, one big difference, and on the white one, you've got a white little earpiece area here as well. So a couple of differences depending on which style you go with. The white one's also two-tone, so you've got a white back and a black front. So very similar to something you might see on, let's say, the Moto X, another very popular device. But it's running Android 4.4 KitKat. One thing I want to point out about the design here that I found kind of interesting, a little nitpicky, but still, you know, since this is a full video review, I want to point it out. When you run your fingers like this over the volume rocker or over the power button, they're definitely sharp buttons. So as you run it through, you can see the sharpness or feel the sharpness on your hand. Now, it's not something that's going to cut my hand by any means. It's not that sharp, but still something as you kind of run your finger maybe up the side or down to click the power button as you're using it in day-to-day use. Could be an issue. Could be something that gets old over time, so something just to kind of keep in mind. But software-wise, you're running Android 4.4 KitKat. It's a vanilla version of Android 4.4, so the way, as Google would probably say, the way they intended it, it does not have any sort of user experience running over top of it like Sense or, for example, TouchWiz, for example, or LG's user interface. Though I would argue in today's world, really what you're getting is LG's user interface with a splash of Android, or Samsung's user interface rather with a splash of Android. You're not getting a skin anymore. You're getting a full-on experience with Sense and TouchWiz and LG's UI. So back to that though here, a relatively vanilla version, or actually completely vanilla version, thanks to it being a member of the Nexus program, version of Android 4.4 KitKat. Now you can immediately see some changes just in the overall design. First, and a big one for me, Hangouts is now the default application, not only as you would expect for Hangouts, but also for SMS as well. So it is your default app for all of your messaging needs on this device. I find it to be a little bit wonky when it comes to SMS, because if I have Hangouts activated, for example, and I have somebody's email address in it, and then I have a person, like a contact, for example, let's say John Doe, and his email address is john@doe.com, and I have to go to text him, sometimes I found that those would route to his email address via Google Hangouts as opposed to running through SMS. So prioritizing that could be a challenge, at least in an initial setup. That's something I would like to see a little bit clearer in a future version of Hangouts on a device, if that makes sense. I'd like to see a little bit more of a distinguishment between SMS and Hangouts itself. So little point that I would make to Google if they're listening, which they're probably not, but hey, you know what? I can dream, right? Right. Anyway, applications here out of the box, you can see widgets, no longer a shortcut to your widgets here directly in the notifications or applications area, I should say. You've got a couple of applications I've installed along with some that came with the restore. You're going to notice a couple of different ones like Chat On, obviously not a Samsung device, but came with the restore that I did when I put in my heronbaker@gmail.com on-camera account, and my Verizon Mobile, obviously not a Verizon unlocked device. So just applications, keep that in mind, that I had from a previous Android device that got carried over via my Gmail account. So Drive here, as you would expect, you've got Chrome out of the box, you've got some Instagram stuff, Photos here as well, Google Photos, Google Plus integration, you've got YouTube, Wallet, and then of course some things I downloaded here as well. You can see on-screen buttons here, back, home, and recent applications. Activates Google here by going to home and pressing on it just like that. Individual area down here, notifications area remains largely unchanged. You've got, of course, your Google Plus shortcut right there, settings, brightness, Wi-Fi, I've got my battery meter, and I can access that much like in Android 4.3 by using 2 fingers and swiping down. Settings here, surprisingly unchanged as well. You've got a shortcut now to tap and pay, where I can pay with just a tap and learn more about that. It takes me to the Google support page, as you can see. It applies only to devices running Android 4.4 when NFC is turned on. I can take advantage of that via Google Wallet. And then over here as well, display, sound, all the typical suspects here in the settings area. Now, if you're asking how to change the wallpaper, how to add widgets, a little bit different here on Android 4.4. You press and hold and you see a new shortcuts area here for wallpaper, for widgets, and for settings. I've got shortcuts to my widgets just by swiping over. You can see all the different stock Google widgets, or vanilla Android widgets out of the box. And then of course I can change my wallpapers as well. If I want to change it up to something a little bit less colorful, a little bit more realistic, I can change it to this mountain scene, for example, and boom, I'm ready to rock and roll. So quick overview of KitKat. Stay tuned for part 2. We're going to talk a lot more about the software, and we're going to talk about the speed as well of this device and how the quad-core processor ticks, 2 gigabytes of RAM, all that good stuff. So stick around for part 2 of the Nexus 5 video review.